It's an interesting phenomena that when light and darkness meet, light always wins out. If you were to walk into a room which was completely dark, but you have a little candle, you'll notice that it's no longer dark. But now suddenly the room is enlightened. That is because of even just a small glimmer of light, even at night when we try to go to sleep and try to darken our room and close the shades. Sometimes there's just a little bit of light from the outside that comes in. And suddenly the room's not completely dark because light always wins. Light is more powerful than darkness. And so in our readings today, when we hear from John, and then really the Gospel of John has one of its incredible and beautiful themes, that contradiction, that paradox of darkness and light. When we hear this, we hear John speaking about the light and about how many people prefer darkness. How sad is that darkness would be more preferable to the light, that people would prefer sin as opposed to goodness, that when we utilize that gift of free will, that we would misuse it in terms of how we make decisions. And so really for God and through the person of Jesus Christ, we know that light came into the world. This story from the 3rd chapter of John's Gospel really is an interaction between Jesus and Nicodemus. Nicodemus was one of the leaders of the church, of the temple at that particular time. And Nicodemus came to Jesus in the dark. He came to Jesus in the middle of the night. And so here we have Nicodemus, who is really representing those within the Jewish faith that were kind of making decisions that were poor, those who were not open to any type of conversion, those who perhaps continued to use and misuse religion. And in that particular manner, Jesus explains to him a little bit more about how that light came into the world, about how the people can be open to the goodness of God and can have hearts that are illuminated. And so in this very short interaction, we see how even in our own life, we can have more of the presence of Christ, who is the light of the world. When Jesus speaks to Nicodemus, he does not scold him. He didn't yell at him. He answered his questions, sometimes with a question in the way that only Jesus can do that. But he answered his questions so that he may have a relationship with him, so that Jesus and Nicodemus kind of formed a bond of some sort there. Jesus didn't nag him. Jesus didn't say, well, you need to believe in me and that's it. He made him think. He put something in his mind about the gift of faith, and that how faith is something that is so special to us that it burns on the inside. Faith is something that burns from the inside of us because God placed it there on the day of our baptism. Think for a moment of the moon. There's many nights and many people are captivated by the beauty of the moon. But the moon at all times is shining in borrowed light. The moon is not producing light in and of itself, but it rather shines with the shadow of the sun. And it has a beauty about it that some nights it's bigger than others and can be very captivating to the human eye. That whole idea of shining in borrowed light is something that we can adapt in our own faith. Because if we see truly Jesus as the light of the world, then we are called upon to reflect that light, to accept it in our hearts, to allow it to burn, and then to be a light for others. And how do we go about that? In this particular week, as we go forth to work, maybe you're off for spring break this week, but maybe you'll have interactions with other people. How are we people who are faith-filled no matter where it is that we go? And to realize that it is not the light that is necessarily inside of us, but it originates from God. We accept it, and then we shine forth with it. Maybe we don't always like to be told that we would be shining in borrowed light because we want to have our own light. But that light of faith comes from God. How is it that we, in our interactions with other people, will spread the gift of our faith? How will we be witnesses to the gospel? In these weeks during Lent, we're trying to talk about our core values, and the one this week that's highlighted in the bulletin and in our annual report with a message from Pope Francis is how can we be witnesses to the gospel? In other words, how do we reflect the light of God? How do we speak about our faith, and how do we evangelize? Some people are scared of that term because they think that evangelization means that we're going to be standing on the street corner up here with signs jumping up and down that say, come to church and, come and be a part of our community. Evangelization is about relationship, mimicking what Jesus did with Nicodemus, speaking to someone, developing a relationship with them, finding out where they're at, bringing them where God wants them to be. There's a lot of darkness in the world. Maybe you know somebody at the moment who has rejected the beauty of God's light. Do you know somebody perhaps who maybe says, I don't believe anymore? Just the fact that they would say that means that they're crying out for a reflection of God's love. And you may be that person to be able to give them that light, to allow them to also then reflect the beauty of God's incredible love for each one of us. So as we hear this gospel today, it's a chance for us to realize God is calling us to be witnesses to the gospel, to share the good news, to reflect his light, to be people of great love, and to be able to realize that that light that God gives to us is a gift. And even in our own personal lives, when we come across that temptation of sin, to always remember that the light of God is so much more powerful than the darkness and the temptation of sin.